We are aware there's a housing crisis. Fully aware. We talk to visitors all the time. We talk to people coming here scouting for places to live. Talking to people who have arrived, hoping to find somewhere to live. And the evidence is clear that we're in a housing crisis. Much of the talk early on had to do with B-21, the arrival of B-21, airmen, construction, and all of the related business at Allender Air Force Base. But the growth is outpacing our ability to create housing without the B-21. So we're certainly not out of the woods. I don't know if we're in the woods yet, but this is the time to take some action. In the last couple of years, we've experienced something startling. The median listing price for homes over the past 2 years has risen $100,000. Market rent has increased 10% in the last 12 months. This is hard to accept for someone just making it. And Rapid City in South Dakota is held up in large part by workers and families who are in the service industry, agriculture, tourism, and not many of these folks are living a luxurious lifestyle. So these market rents are a little bit devastating. Even more, rents increased more in the past year than in the past 5 years combined. That's a lot to take in. We all know that inflation's been a factor. We're paying more at the grocery store and gas pump and everywhere else. But now when you go home to the place of security, you're paying more and more, sometimes with each month. Rental vacancies are at historic lows and about half of the national average. Oops. Things are really dark here on the rental market. Okay? So the rental trends are quite alarming. And 2% vacancy, for one thing, it means that housing is scarce, but it also means that there's no incentive for rents to come down. There's no competition that's able to bring rents down. So what do? Well, the response cannot be to point to the developers and say this is all your issue. It can't be to point to government and say this is simply a government problem, nor can any faith be put in the private market-driven forces that typically account for 1% growth in our community. And it also cannot be simply responsibility of philanthropy. This has to be a team approach, a partnership with the public, private, and philanthropic sectors. So at this point, Elevate, City Rapid City, and John T. Vucurevich Foundation, and Black Hills Community Foundation are joining forces to address the issue. So we're getting all the right players, all the right team members in place, and we're focusing now on tools and eventually how to deploy them. So this is a real issue, and I think we're working on a real response. So now I'll introduce Tom Johnson.
Mayor, thank you. Thanks to everybody for being here. It's an honor to be included in this group trying to solve our housing crisis. It feels like just a few months ago, this happens every week actually. 3 or 4 months ago, we had up in our conference room the school district, and they were asking us to help them find housing for teachers. And then we had the hospital asking us to find housing for nurses. And then we had a manufacturer asking us to find housing for their workers. And so this gets to be a consistent theme over time. You can't continue to recruit businesses to Rapid City. And by the way, we have about 60 businesses at any one time looking at the area to come here without dealing with this issue. So recruiting businesses, job growth, it's all there. We've experienced a prosperity in Rapid City's history like we've never experienced. Wages are at an all-time high. We're almost at $1 billion in gross sales every month now in Rapid City. So we're experiencing quite the prosperity, but it comes with this other side of it, which is the cost of housing is also going up. And so we've got to do something about it. So we can't just sit in our conference room and listen about folks trying to get housing. We decided finally to put our money where our mouth is. I think elevate steps to the table many times the community needs us, and we're hoping now to do it again. So in conjunction with the Community Foundation, we've decided to hire a housing coordinator. Her name is Laura Jones, and Laura, if you would just wait real quick. We knew we needed somebody good. Laura certainly fits the billing. We went through an extensive process, interviewed dozens of candidates to make sure we got the right person for this job, and we feel really comfortable already seeing Laura on the job for about a month now, and we've got the right person. We need somebody that works with the development community. Because developers that are here or are new to town, they want to reach out to the city. Maybe they want somebody to work on their behalf in conjunction with the city, and Laura can do that. So we're here to assist the development community as they look at projects. Where should they put projects? What kinds of housing stocks should they have? We're going to have Laura be available for that. Laura's also here to work with stakeholders. So businesses that are looking for housing, they're trying to find housing. Laura will also know, and Elevate will know when the latest housing development is going to go in, stuff that's not even on the market, that you can't even find if you're online. And so we'll be able to point folks in the right direction. And then finally, if you've been following our monthly economic indicators, you know that we try to monitor the general economic health of the Rapid City area. And we plan on doing that and doing deep dives with housing as well. We've got a gentleman by the name of Garth Wadsworth who will work with Laura to put together a set of economic indicators, if you will, just for housing. So we can go into the deep dives of housing on a consistent basis to tell the community where we're at, how we're making progress, and what we plan to do. So we hope, again, that this is just the first step. You'll hear from other speakers today about what other solutions we're going to have, but just having somebody there who devotes their time 24/7, 365 to housing is very important to us, and it will be very important to the community. So we hope you'll give us and Laura a call for anything related to housing. We'll point you in the right direction. If we need to get involved ourselves, we will. If we need to make the right referral, we're going to do that. So with that, I'm excited to introduce Alan Solano, who's the president and CEO of the Vucurevich Foundation, to talk about some other things we're working on in related to the actual financing of these kinds of projects. So Alan, please join us.
Thank you, Tom. As Tom indicated, I'm Alan Solano, the president and CEO of the Vucurevich Foundation. The last housing study that was done for the Rapid City community was commissioned by the foundation back in 2017. And when you think about 2017 to now and the types of changes that we've seen in our community, they've been dramatic. But let me take you back just to a data point from 2017. In that study, there was approximately 4,500 households in the Rapid City area. It's about 12% that were paying more than 50% of their household income to their rent or the mortgage and utilities. And when we look at the data around housing, we're really trying to keep people at no more than 30% of their household income going into housing, otherwise they're cost burden. So in that time, since 2017, we've seen the dramatic changes. We've seen the inflow of people into the state, in particular into the Black Hills and the Rapid City area. Many of those are retirees that are moving into the community, but also the impact that's yet to come with the expansion of the base in B21. So as a collaboration of the partners that you see here today, we've commissioned a new housing study for the Rapid Rapid City area. And so that study is in process. It went out for bid. We've got 3 organizations that will be being interviewed here in the next couple of weeks, where a decision will be made. So that we'll get the latest information and data as it relates to the housing issues and the demographic changes that we've seen in the community. So we hope to have that housing study completed and published by fall of this year. That again will give us the data that we need to make the decisions. We need to understand what's been the population change, what's the demographic change. We know incomes have gone up. We also know that the cost of housing is dramatically gone up. So what gaps exist? We believe in 2017 we had about 3,000 apartment multifamily units that we were short, that were affordable, and we need to better understand through data what does that look like today, how much is that problem growing. So with that, I'll introduce Liz Hamburg with the Black Area Community Foundation to talk about the Housing Trust Fund that's the Allender Community Foundation. Liz?
Thank you, Colin. I'm Liz Hamburg. I'm the CEO of the Black Hills Area Community Foundation. And in 2020, we began to build a strategic housing trust fund for Rapid City. At that point in time with the pandemic, we were working more to keep people housed and help with rental assistance and things like that. We started the fund with a generous donation from all of you at Rapid City, $150,000. The ultimate goal of this fund is to provide a new resource for housing that will increase inventory at the lower end of the housing market. Multifamily rentals is really what we're looking at. Again, this is a collection of public, private, and philanthropic dollars. We will be receiving money from the Vision Fund from the City of Rapid City. We've had donations from a variety of businesses and individual donors. So it's a way to really grow this asset and create revolving loans, very low interest, that will support the creation or the restoration of inventory for that lower end of the multifamily housing market. We learned about trust funds from other cities from one of our partners, Common Bond Communities in St. Paul. Common Bond is also starting a project here in Rapid City. They will be breaking ground in May. They focus on that lower end of the market, and they also provide support services to the residents of this property. So this is going to be a really great mission to Rapid City. Excuse me. Our first low-interest loan or program-related investment has already been issued to Common Bond Communities for $550,000. We have a couple other applications in the pipeline right now. And again, this is governed by an advisory board of multiple stakeholders, public, government, philanthropic, and then those recommendations are made to our board of directors to release those dollars. So it is a new tool, new toolkit to address the need of that lower end of the rental housing market.
Thank you, Liz. We just close this up by talking about, again, you heard some statistics today, but let me just put it to you bluntly. We've got about 2,500 people living in the Black Hills each year, right now. This is before the base. Just because they like the quality of life, low taxes, and what South Dakota and the Black Hills stand. We also know the B-21 is coming in the next 10 years. It'll start moving planes out to 25, 26. We think that's going to add another 7,000 to 10,000 people to the area in the next 10 years. So you add that with the 2,000 or 2,500 that are already moving here, we know that this place is going to increase somewhere in the range of 25,000 to 40,000 people in the next 10 years. That's a lot of growth. We're already possibly 6,000 units behind the housing right now. We think we're going to need another 2,000 per year for the next 10 years. We need the community's help. We need the state's help as well. And that's why we're looking to the state to continue to help us. And right now, the state is looking, and we've had Anna Hayes, our public policy director, over here for the last month, pushing for bills to try to fund housing at the local level. And thankfully, it's worked. There was a summer study by the legislature that also came to the conclusion that we needed housing. We could have told them 16 months ago that was true, but they went through the study anyway, and they determined, yes, you guys do need some housing. And they also decided to do something about it. We want to thank our friends in the legislature, our contingent from the Rapid City and the Bennington and Meade County areas. We also want to thank the governor's office. They got together and came up with a bill, and it's called Senate Bill 53. It's possibly $200 million to go to all South Dakota communities, divided up in terms of loan funds and infrastructure. They're still debating on how that's exactly going to look, but we think Rapid City should be able to access a significant amount of those funds. And in fact, that bill is being debated right now as we speak in appropriations. There's two companion bills that talk about the disbursements of those funds as well. Senate Bill 65 and House Bill 1033. You don't have to learn all the details, just know that we need this community's help. It is time to reach out to our legislators. It's time to contact our state representative and tell them to pass this bill, not just ours, but everyone. So whether it's the governor's office, legislature that you invited me 20 years ago that you know is in session right now, or the one that's in your district, we need help passing this bill. So we need community support for this, and we ask you to join us in advocating and continue to advocating for pushing this multifaceted approach to solving housing. Elevate's mission is to elevate the region for everyone. And we can't do that without housing. People identify and find meaning in their work. They can't find meaning in their work if they don't have a place to live. And that's why we're here today, again, asking for the support, thanking our partners, and trying to push this stuff through. And with that, I think we'll answer questions if there are any. So thanks for being here, thanks for standing with us, and thanks for elevating the region for everyone. So with that, any questions? Ooh, we wowed you. Too much.
I have some questions about that.
Yes.
I was wondering, you mentioned that Elder Representative separated that median housing list price by zip code. Could you be able to talk a little bit about what that does, what that's showing you, and if there are other areas with potential for growth specifically for housing?
I'm going to have to pull, unless one of my staffers can give me the indicators now, I see what we're running for. I can tell you that we separated them out by the big three zip codes in the area, 57701, 57702, and 57703. We know that the one with the least expensive housing is 57701. And I believe, I'm going to butcher this, but I know that the average list price for that zip code, I think, is in the mid 230s to 240 range, 240,000. But again, I'll get to those numbers in a second. We know it goes up from there. So the farther west you get with that zip code, the higher the housing prices, list price are. I think it's 57702. That's the average list price last month. I think around 600,000. And then I think the 73 zip code, 57703 zip code is in the middle there. You put that all together, that makes the average look like it's around 370 to 380. So it looks pretty ominous. But I appreciate the question because it really does depend on which zip code that you do live in. We know growing east is where we have to grow because they just don't have a lot of current going west with the federal lands and just a lot of building out there. And the cost with the topography being more expensive. So we know we've got to grow east. We think that's the prime location for housing that is more affordable for those workers that are coming here making 40, 50, 60,000, which is better jobs than we're bringing down. So we know that we've got to go east, and we've got to get more affordable for everyone.
This may be more of a question for Mayor Allender, but since there needs to be expansion to the east, or that's the most likely place, is there a possibility for annexation, and is there a possibility to envelop Rapid Valley? It's already seeing a lot of growth in a lot of subdivision.
Good questions. Yes, with the need to expand east, there are many issues that will have to be addressed by the city. Those developments in Rapid Valley are now being developed with without the typical government support in terms of infrastructure and that sort of thing. Plus, that is perhaps our weakest area of town as it comes to water production. Most of our water production is clear on the west side of town, and pushing that water out to the east has alerted us already that we need some improvements out there. There's much of Rapid Valley that is facing large developments of several hundred homes at a time, and that presents some real life issues that have to be addressed. And so, Pennington County officials and city officials have been discussing this behind the scene for a little while. The talks are getting very serious now, and so there will be more information coming out on this very soon. But yes, not only to the east, but anywhere in Rapid City, if the justification exists, annexation could be one of the discussion topics that we face. So much more to come on that. We're at the beginning stages of this.
There's been some talk of some lower income and more affordable housing areas that are experiencing issues with the people that are running them, so they're turning into the word that they use is slumlord. And there's been apartments saying, what are we doing to make sure that we're getting affordable housing, but that they're being maintained and looked after the same way any other building would be?
Well, from my perspective, there's affordable housing and there's affordable housing. Many of the large apartment complexes that were built in the 70s, 80s, some of those have some property management challenges. The new apartments, I think, are being built on a much smarter scale and management plan. So I don't anticipate that being an issue. We are working with a number of property managers, though, within the Rapid City area, and frankly, many of them live outside the state, so that makes it difficult. We have had some of them here in town recently for discussions, and so we're working to do our part. But the government typically only has a hammer, and that doesn't solve all the problems here, so it's going to have to be another team approach. We're working hard on it.
Actually, I wanted to touch basis on the question as well, if you can. So we received some information from a lady who works she lives in Kingsway Apartments. And she said that she has never had heat for 3 weeks. As of now, she has not had hot water, and she's contacted both the health department and the city code. When you are in existing buildings and they have pre-existing issues, what are your renters' rights? Like, what will be the next step if she's gone and she's contacted the city?
The location.
Kingsway Apartments.
You know, maybe the mayor's second, I think, to think about that one. I think that's probably more of a code issue. But let me address what the mayor said about affordable housing with respect to those that are maybe in poverty or in crisis. We've had a chance to visit with a lot of cities in the last year about what they do and what they're doing for affordable housing. And they really encourage us, and we're starting to think of this as well. We need to stop thinking of housing as just a commodity. In other words, to say, hey, we've got this, and I just did it earlier, but I encourage myself to stop talking about it that way as well. We think about, we need this many housing units. That's one way to just make housing sound like a commodity. And that's one way to make folks who are in the affordable income bracket sound also like a commodity, and that's not what we're trying to do with housing. We've talked with the communities, and they encourage us that we need to start thinking about housing as a amenity, no matter where you fall on the spectrum. So whether you're making $40,000 a year or $100,000 a year, your level of income might change the number of bedrooms you have or the square footage that you have, but it shouldn't change the quality of the housing that you live in. So we're encouraging developers, at least on the Elevate side, to think about housing as not a commodity that you're trying to solve this many units, but as an amenity, and every person that has value, and everyone does, deserves amenities that are at the same general level. So that we're encouraging through our advocacy efforts those kind of things. With respect to, and I know the mayor's going to answer the specific questions you had, with respect to individual landowners, land developers, with respect to individual land apartment owners, it's hard to know the situation given the context, but that's not something that we stand for, that's not part of our values, and we encourage all of our folks that own rental units or housing units to work with folks at a basic human decency level, and that's just not something that Elevator, I know my colleagues up here would say is a value for us. I know the mayor may have something more specifically.
Regarding the question about a renter who doesn't have heat, who doesn't have water, we need to hear from that person. When we hear from that person, we will speak with them and find out the circumstances, make sure that it's not someone who's attempting to be evicted or some bizarre set of circumstances. But if this is a rent-paying tenant who simply can't get that service from the landlord, we will obtain an inspection warrant from the court, march right up there and go in that apartment building and get to the root of that problem. And people will be held accountable. But the term you used, renters' rights, that's actually come up in a conversation we had just a week ago or less than a week ago, as we're talking about how to address, it's an age-old problem, how to address the worst of the landlords in the community, the worst 1% or 5%. It's been an issue for as long as I've been in Rapid City. We've tried a number of different things. There's a collision point where people want to fight about property rights and private industry and the government's role and all this type of thing. But where someone can't get heat or water or things of that nature, we're going to step in. Any other questions?
Some members of the community are really concerned about responsible growth. Of course, there is this need with so many people coming in, but how will the city and all the organizations working together help balance that kind of responsible growth of making sure that you're not getting, a bunch of apartment buildings in areas that aren't necessarily zoned for, and how much work is being done with the community development department and this?
Well, our community development department is very busy, obviously with all of the growth. Responsible growth is a philosophy or a desired outcome, and there's many ways to pursue that. I, for one, have trust that no one is going to spend millions or tens of millions of dollars of their own money to put an apartment building somewhere where it cannot succeed. So our community development department takes special care in making sure that all of the proposed developments match with the long-range plan, the long-range use of these areas of our community. And also now we're starting to address the need for things like fire stations and parks and other basic amenities that make a neighborhood a neighborhood. So it's something we're on board for, and we'll do our part to make sure that responsible growth occurs. I believe the developers, to what extent they can, in terms of volume, will do the same. Used TIF districts liberally over the past 40 years, and I wouldn't imagine anything is going to change that. So if a case can be made for public improvements with the development, and there are tax increment financing eligible expenses, that we're open to that. Unfortunately, very few tools we have for things of this nature. But we're here to partner up with people who need to get this work done. Any other questions? Thanks for coming, everyone. Elvin has coffee and cookies over here. Just kidding. Thanks for coming. We'll be around to chat.